What you're about to hear is not just a political statement. It is a moment that moved trillions of dollars, shook global markets, and then quietly started falling apart in front of the entire world. And the most dangerous part is it happened so fast that most people still don't fully understand what really went on behind the scenes. Because within minutes, something didn't add up. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. On that Monday morning, Donald Trump made a claim that sounded like a breakthrough, a turning point that could end rising global tension. He said the United States and Iran were engaged in productive conversations, and a deal was not far away. Now here's where things start to get serious. Because the markets didn't wait for verification, they reacted instantly, aggressively, and almost blindly. According to financial data reported by Reuters, trillions in global market value shifted within moments of that statement. Stocks surged sharply, oil prices dropped rapidly, and investors behaved as if peace had already been achieved. But what happened next completely changed the story. Less than 2 hours later, Iran publicly rejected everything. Not partially, not carefully, completely. Iran's parliamentary leadership stated clearly there were no negotiations, no discussions, no direct talks at all, and they labeled the claim as false. Now pause here for a second, because this is where the real mystery begins. If there were no talks, then what exactly moved the markets? And more importantly, who acted before everyone else? Because here comes the part backed by trading data. Roughly 15 minutes before Trump's announcement became public, something unusual happened in the oil market. According to Reuters trading analysis, thousands of oil futures contracts were suddenly executed in a very tight time window. This was not normal trading behavior. This was volume spikes far beyond average patterns. Around 5,100 contracts traded in just 1 minute. That represents over $500 million in value. At the same time, S&P 500 futures worth over $1.5 billion were bought, and oil positions worth nearly $192 million were sold. Now think carefully. Those exact positions would benefit perfectly from what happened next. Oil dropped, stocks surged, and the trades were already in place before the public even knew. That is not speculation. That is timing. And timing like this always raises one uncomfortable question. Who knew first? The White House denied any wrongdoing, but it did not explain the timing. And that silence matters. Because while markets were celebrating peace, the reality on the ground was moving in the opposite direction. According to Reuters and regional reports, strikes were still actively hitting Iranian infrastructure. In Isfahan, gas facilities were targeted. In Kermanshah, pipeline systems feeding power stations were hit. In Bushehr, a desalination facility, critical for water supply, was damaged, and a meteorological officer lost his life at his post. That is not a pause. That is escalation continuing under a different narrative. So now the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. Public message, peace. Actual reality, continued strikes. And when these two things don't match, something bigger is always happening underneath. Now let's go deeper. Trump mentioned a mysterious Iranian figure. He described him as powerful, respected, and close to leadership. But he refused to name him. Saying it could get him killed. That statement alone raises serious questions, because unnamed sources in geopolitics are not unusual, but building a global market reaction on them is, and later reports confirmed something critical. There were no direct talks. None. Communication was happening through intermediaries. Countries like Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan were passing messages. That is not a negotiation. That is a signal, a possibility, not a deal. And yet the world reacted as if everything had already been decided. Now step back and look at the bigger picture. Because this is no longer just about one statement. This is about a chain reaction. And the chain is getting longer. Iran's response did not stay limited. It expanded across the region. Power infrastructure in Kuwait was disrupted. Oil facilities in Saudi-linked zones were targeted. Drone activity increased across multiple airspaces. Missile defenses in Israel were activated repeatedly, and the pressure kept building. This is what escalation looks like in real time. Not loud announcements, but expanding impact. And here's where things get even more serious. Over 1 million people have already been displaced in Lebanon alone. That is not a statistic. That is a humanitarian shift. And it tells you the situation is no longer contained. Now let's talk about military movement. Because words can say one thing, but deployments reveal the truth. Trump publicly said no troops were being sent. But Pentagon activity tells a different story. Naval groups carrying thousands of Marines were already preparing to move. The USS Tripoli deployment was confirmed. Additional Marine units were on standby. Airborne divisions were preparing rapid deployment capability. And this is all documented through defense reporting. So now we have 3 layers: public messaging, market reaction, military reality, and none of them fully match. That is where uncertainty turns into risk. Now comes the most critical piece of this entire situation: the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway. only about 21 miles wide at its tightest point, but it carries a massive portion of global oil supply. And according to energy agencies, disruption here affects the entire world. Iran has made it clear it is not looking to fully close the strait. It is looking to control it, selectively, strategically. That is a completely different kind of threat. Because control changes power dynamics. Closure creates crisis, but control creates leverage, and leverage can last much longer. Reports indicate Iran has considered transit fees and coordination requirements for ships. That is a direct challenge to global trade norms and potentially international law. Now combine this with what has already happened. According to Reuters, multiple ships have been struck. Traffic has dropped dramatically. Some estimates suggest a reduction of up to 95%. Thousands of seafarers are stranded. Supply chains are under pressure. And energy markets are reacting to every small update. Now let's bring in economic impact. Because this is where it hits everyone. Oil prices surged from around $65 to over $120 during peak tension. The International Energy Agency called it one of the largest disruptions in history, even larger than some past oil crises. Emergency reserves were released, hundreds of millions of barrels. But that only covers days, not long-term disruption. LNG supply is tightening, fertilizer prices are rising, flights are being canceled, mortgage rates are climbing, investment funds are restricting withdrawals. This is how a regional conflict becomes a global economic event, slowly, then suddenly. And here comes the trap. Iran's condition to end the conflict is control over the strait. The US cannot accept that, but forcing control back requires escalation, possibly ground involvement. And public support for that is low. That is the dilemma. And it is not easy to solve, because every option has consequences, and every delay increases pressure. Meanwhile, global attention is divided. Other geopolitical signals are emerging. Nuclear messaging from North Korea, rising uncertainty in multiple regions, and limited bandwidth for response. So now we are at a critical point. The pause is temporary, the deployments are real, the markets are unstable, and the situation is still evolving. Nothing is fully resolved. Nothing is fully clear. And that uncertainty is the biggest risk of all. Because when clarity disappears, volatility increases, and when volatility increases, mistakes happen. Now think back to where we started. A single statement, a market reaction, a denial, and a chain reaction that is still unfolding. The question is not what happened. The question is what happens next. Because the next move could redefine everything. Markets, power, stability, and global balance. So now I want to ask you something. Do you think this was controlled messaging or something that slipped out of control? Because the difference matters, and your perspective matters. If you follow markets, geopolitics, and real power shifts, this is exactly where you need to stay informed. So make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with others who need to understand this, and most importantly, drop your opinion in the comments, because this story is not finished, not even close, and the next update might change everything again. Stay ready, stay informed, and keep watching closely, because what looks like calm might just be the setup for something bigger, and what looks like peace might only be a pause, a temporary one, before the next phase begins. And when it does, it will not move slowly, it will move fast. Very fast. Faster than most people expect. And by the time headlines catch up, the real move will already be underway. That is how these moments work. Quiet signals, then sudden impact. So keep your eyes open, because the story is still writing itself, and we are watching it in real time. One move at a time, one decision at a time, one reaction at a time, until the full picture finally becomes clear or changes again. And when it does, we will break it down again right here with you. So stay connected, stay alert, and don't miss what comes next, because the ending is still unknown. And that is what makes this moment so important and so dangerous and so powerful. We are not at the end. We are in the middle, and the middle is where everything changes. Keep watching, keep thinking, keep questioning, because that is where real understanding begins. And that is what this channel is about, breaking it down step by step, without noise, without confusion, just clarity, real clarity. So subscribe now, like the video, share it forward, and tell me your view below, because your voice matters here, and I read every comment, every single one. Let's understand this together before the next move happens, because it will.